Welcome, everyone, to Rising Out of the Chrysalis Stories That Inspire with Marissa Grace, where we share life stories of struggle and triumph, not only of my own life experiences, but also through the experiences of my guests, as a way to help you have breakthroughs and find hope in your own life. I'm Marissa Grace, and today I have a special guest, Dr. Bob Saul. Thank you so much for coming on. So happy to have you here today.
Oh, I'm excited to be here. Thank you so much. It's my pleasure.
My pleasure. So, Dr. Bob, you have this story of yours. You started out, as a doctor. You were a practicing doctor for many years and pediatrician. And then at some point, things kind of took a different turn in your life. So I'd love to hear about that and about your journey that led you to what you're doing today.
Sure. I finished my training in 1979, though as both a pediatrician and also subsequently a medical geneticist. So I was very engaged when I started practice. But I found out that about maybe 14 years into practice that I really wasn't paying back to the community like I should. I was thriving in my practice, being very engaged, but was I using my opportunity as a physician to really participate in the community? And I felt the answer was no. So I went, it was fortuitous. I heard a talk at the same time from somebody who was arguing that hospital systems need to tithe back to their communities. And in that talk, he said 12 words that have had a profound impact on me ever since. He said, for anything that happens in the community, I am the problem, I am the solution, I am the resource. Now, I must admit, it took me a while to internalize that message, realizing that it's not their drug problem, it's not their violence problem, it's not their homelessness problem, it has to be mine. That I have to be recognizing the problem as mine also, and recognizing that I have to be part of the solution. And to do that, I need to devote my resources to it. So,
That's really interesting that you felt that way. We often, look upon the medical industry at our doctors as somebody that already is of service to the community, by helping individuals, feel better, get better. So for you to feel that way, that through your practice and helping individuals as a doctor, you didn't feel like you were giving enough to the community.
you're right. And I don't know why that was. Maybe I can thank my mother for that in terms of always being conscious about the need to help others. And you're right, as a physician, sometimes, especially because of the hours one does as a physician, 60 plus hours a week initially, maybe even more. In training, it was 100 hours a week. One would argue that you're already paying back and helping others, but I just didn't feel that way myself.
Oh, I see. And when you heard these words and these words started manifesting kind of in your brain instead of like working in your head, like you have to be the solution, to also be part of the solution to all these problems the community are facing. What was the conclusion that you came to once that, you came to that realization that you had to do something about it?
Well, I mean, it percolated in my head for months in terms of, okay, what do I do about it? And so I went to many of the leaders in the community and said, I'm ready. Put me in, coach. What else can I do? What can I do to be a positive influence? So I got involved in a variety of community activities. I got involved in our Chamber of Commerce. I got involved in community wellness celebrations. And so in those ways, there was, sort of the active involvement. There's always offshoots of things that happen to keep one engaged. And so I was very, very engaged and felt maybe I felt sort of smug in my engagement that I was such a good citizen, that I was so involved. But then I had my next comeuppance. April 20, 1999. Two teenagers walk into a high school in Littleton, Colorado, massacre 13 people, and kill themselves. You and I know that as Columbine, and I don't know why that had such a profound impact on me, but it did. I asked myself, could that happen in my community? And the answer, of course, was yes. What have I done to make a difference? And the answer I felt was not enough. So I put pencil to paper, and I'd never done that before, and wrote an article to the local newspaper about what each of us could do to make a difference in our community. And I identified them as the 5 steps to community improvement. So I wrote that article, and subsequently over the next 12, 13 years, wrote over 160 op-ed articles to the paper about these 5 steps to community improvement. And I think that got me on this journey that I'm still on today, but be glad to go over those 5 steps to community improvement.
That's wonderful. Did it kind of set like something within you about just writing as a way to give back, of ideas or different ways? So by putting, your pen to paper and just, writing something that you haven't done before, that it's kind of almost an artistic form of expression, of expressing how you feel, but in written form to the world.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have so many ideas and you think you know some things, but it isn't until you try to articulate those on paper or now on a keyboard that you finally start to put some ideas start to crystallize in your head. And as I was writing these, and honestly, I wanted to sort of, if I had such a thing as a bully pulpit in the community as a trusted professional, I wanted to use that in a way that would be impactful. So as I wrote these various articles about these 5 steps, oftentimes I would write them, and I shared them with my wife. And she said, "Oh, I don't know about that one. That sounds a little preachy to me." And I said, "Well, you really don't understand who I'm preaching to, honey." And she said, "What do you mean?" I said, "These are action steps for me. And if they have any benefit for others, great. If not, it at least is something for me and helps me, I think, be a better person as I identify these things that I should be doing. And if they can have benefit to others, that's great." And then it turns out they did, because people would come up to me in the community, identify me by my little mugshot in the newspaper, and say, "Thank you, Dr. Saul, for doing that. It really makes a difference."
Yeah, I was gonna say, so the response from the community that you had by writing these articles, was it a positive one? Was it a welcoming one? How was that response?
It was both of those. It was indeed, some people wanted to know if there had been a larger gap between. They want to know, when's your next article coming out? So it was very much positive and very welcoming, and of course it was great for me.
So I want to kind of circle back to your childhood. You mentioned your mom that might have installed this sense of, giving back to the community. So what was that like, you growing up and having that connection, or that kind of those things installed in you? So, a lot of us are raised with different belief systems. Either we become very attached to a religion, whatever church we go to, or family values. What was it like for you growing up? And what were the values that, were installed upon you?
My parents divorced when I was young.
Mm-hmm.
And my father, unfortunately, suffered the ravages of alcoholism, and I think also post-traumatic stress disorder. I think World War II was not kind to him. And so those two things led to him not being a good parent at times. At other times, he was a grandparent, but uh, sometimes his abusive behavior, not toward the kids, but toward my mother, and not necessarily even physical, but emotional and verbal, created great strife in the family.
Mm-hmm.
My mother recognized the need to separate and divorce. But she was not, even though we were a family of some financial means, we were not a family of emotional means because my grandparents did not support her in a divorce. That was just something you just did not do back
Right.
then. Um, but she did, recognizing that she needed to do what she could to raise her two children as best she could. And she was phenomenal. But it's interesting. She always said, and I remember this well into my second decade of life, maybe even to my early 20s. Bob, I just want you to be happy. I just want you to be happy. Unfortunately, in retrospect, what I did not follow her words, but followed her actions. She was the ultimate good citizen. She was there to help people. She was there to nurture people. She was there to lend a kind word. And those are the things that I think I picked up on to then going into my career, going off to college and in medical school and pediatric training and beyond. That set the example for what I wanted to do when I became a grown adult and a parent and a spouse and those sorts of things.
Sure, absolutely. Well, what I find is a lot of times with, children from that come from a relationship where there is some type of abuse, where, you know, the mom or dad is an alcoholic, they're either physical or mental or verbally abusive, that, two things could happen. Either the child's going to become rebellious and go in a direction that's not very healthy because they haven't been able to deal with the emotions, or they end up becoming very loving children and adults where they, have big hearts and do give back to the community or go into a field of helping others. Um, and what I find is that when and just like myself, my own father also alcoholic and physically and verbally abusive, and I also have a brother, and we kind of took different paths. But it's interesting that out of a chaotic home, that something beautiful could come out of it, which is kind of, interesting because you think, well, that's why kids get messed up and they get into drugs because they had a broken home, but not that often. Yes, you have those children, but you have these children that grow up to be these magnificent adults who are so loving and giving, that want to give back to the community, that want to help others that are going through struggles in their life. And that is amazing to me. And I find it over and over again when I meet people and working with so many individuals, that they do have so much love to give to others because they've come from a broken home of sorts, right? Now, kind of picked up on your mom's example of giving back to the community, and you took your writing and you went further with that. And you went on to write this magnificent book. So love to hear about that, and what that's all about and how that's helping, families all around the world.
Well, the first book I published was called My Children's Children, Raising Young Citizens in the Age of Columbine. It looked at those 5 steps to community improvement that I articulated. And I think, number one, learn to be the best parent you could be. Parenting is a constant learning experience. And not everyone has the same abilities. So my job as a pediatric professional was to help people be the best parent they could be. It was to gently peer behind the curtain, see the situation, and to help enable them in the manner they could do. They could be the best parent they could be. Number two in those steps was get involved. It's so important to get involved in some way, shape, or form, and there are so many ways to do it. Number three was stay involved. That sounds similar, but I think it's different. It's tough sometimes to stay involved. Number four was maybe the most intuitive and the most obvious, but sometimes the most difficult in our divisive society, love for others. We tend to shout at and around people these days and be fear mongering when we should be seeing what we can do to help each other. And then number five is the toughest one, is forgiveness. Learning how to practice forgiveness, learning how to forgive ourselves, learning how to forgive others, and learning how to do it now is tough. So those five steps took me into that first book and opened up a whole new avenue for me. Maybe that chrysalis, that butterfly, was blooming, because then that allowed me to look at other things, come up with a children's book related to that, come up with another book with another physician about that whole process, and then my most recent book about conscious parenting. And so this has been, if we go back to 1993, when I sort of said, oh, I need to do more, where I'm now almost I'm 30 years into this process. And it's been so exciting. It's opened up so many avenues. I've retired from being a day-to-day doctor, but I'm never withdrawn from doing what I need to do to advocate for children and families.
And when you published that first book, what was the response, the feedback that you received?
Well, I got good feedback, but it was like so many things when you self-publish,
Mm-hmm.
it had nominal distribution. I mean, I would have loved for it to have been spread far and wide, but it was not. But for me, but it did what it needed to do for me. It gave me that kick in the pants to keep going down the road.
But it's like practice, right?
Yeah.
It's like it was the initial practice for things to come. But I love what you said about, giving back, but staying in the community, staying helping, right? Because a lot of people will start, but they don't stay for too long to continue that journey of helping throughout. And then you also have like individuals that kind of just want to be part of the community, just to say, hey, I'm part of the community. Not necessarily because they want to contribute towards the community. They just want to be known for doing it. What do you have to say about that?
Well, I think that we need to change the pronoun in those 12 words for folks like that, where I'm the problem, I'm the solution, I'm the resource. We are the problem, we are the solution, we are the resource. And so you can't, the we has to mean you have to roll up your sleeves, and you can't just say, yes, I am. But, I recognize that everyone has different abilities and different ways they might engage. And so it's not that you have to go down and work at the food bank to demonstrate you're an engaged member of your community. There's lots of different ways, but I think you have, and it can be through your church. It can be through.
Absolutely. It could be through your own family.
Yeah.
Oftentimes we ignore our own family, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, one of the big take-home messages from that first book is, for me, was the whole point of parenting for me is to raise your children to be good citizens. Now, one could argue that what my mother was trying to say is, I just want you to be happy. Well, my first marriage ended in divorce, and I remember telling my oldest son, I just want you to be happy, sort of echoing my mother's words. And then I realized, as I got down on this journey, my children's children, that really what I wanted my son to be was a good citizen. then happiness would be a blissful secondary side effect. And I realize that's naive. There's struggles along the way that will make that difficult. Uh, but I really am devoted to that concept.
And that's a wonderful concept, to really, be promoting out there and try to get people to understand that how important that is. Because it is important to be a good citizen, right? To be able to help the community. But I always find that community starts at home. If you can't help the people that are right next to you, but you extend yourself to go help somebody that's miles away from you that you don't know, it's kind of like turning one blind eye and just say, I'm just going to ignore this problem, but I'll make it up to God if I just help that person, and then I'll be even. To me, community, you don't have to go out and, be so involved in a community. You can start with the people around you that are at home that might be in need of your help, your neighbor. If your neighbor is in need of help, right? That's part of the community. It's just small little things, small steps of just helping someone or another citizen that that might be struggling. Maybe they don't have enough money for groceries. You just pick up a bag of groceries. That's part of helping the community. It doesn't mean you have to go out there and really participate in a non-profit organization that, to say, oh, I'm part of this organization, therefore I'm giving back to the community. I'm part of my church, so I'm already giving towards the community. I mean, you could be a member and be part of, but if you're not actively involved or giving back in some way, then what does that mean? Just to be part of the community.
Oh, I agree. You have to, I mean, that you have to, it's like the old analogy on the airplane. If all of a sudden the oxygen mask drop, you have to put the oxygen mask on yourself first.
Right.
So you can help your loved ones that need help. So you're absolutely right. You have to, I don't mean to separate the two. But you can certainly treat you practice your citizenship at home.
Yes. That's where it starts, because then, it expands beyond the home.
Yeah.
It goes beyond the home. There have many times where I've had to help my brother, and then, because of my kind heart towards him, I see that, he would do an act of kindness to somebody else as well. So, if we start ignoring the people around us, as if, I'm not going to deal with that because I'm angry at this person or whatever, so I refuse to help them, that you're going to receive that back somewhere else. So, that doesn't mean that if you go out and then help somebody in a community, like, oh, I helped this person, I dropped off the bag of goods. But if you're at home angry at somebody that's closer to you and you refuse to help them, it kind of contradicts the concept of giving back, right? Because you're kind of like pretending that you're helping, but you're really not, because you're still being angry at the people probably need the most help from you that are closer to you.
Oh yeah, I would agree. But I think part of this journey, I mean, especially for me as a pediatrician, in terms of trying to give advice for parents, then is being a conscious parent, understanding where you are. And that's tough sometimes. I mean, when I took a leadership course, I learned what was at then time called conscious leadership. And they talked about a line. When you're above the line, you're open, you're receptive, you're ready to learn. When you're below the line, you're closed, you're defensive, you're always right. And the whole point about conscious leadership is just sort of knowing where you are. And you can be below the line, and sometimes we will be because we're angry, we're mad, we're upset about
Mm-hmm.
something. But if we can be conscious about it, then that tells us how we can start to make incremental changes to be above the line. Same thing holds with parenting, conscious parenting. And I call the line the parental awareness threshold. When you're above the line, you're open, you're receptive, you're ready to learn, you're ready to be actively engaged with your children. When you're below, you're closed, you're defensive, you're always right because I said so, because I'm the parent. And we're going to be on both sides of that. The point of conscious parenting is knowing where you are at any moment in time, and that's tough. That takes work,
Mm-hmm.
and also knowing where your child is, uh, because you have
Absolutely.
different
I always say
expectations.
our children are our biggest teachers.
They are certainly teachers. I don't know if they're their biggest teachers, but I would certainly.
They always bring out of you what you need to work on.
Well, they make you humble, and
Yes, they do.
if you're not humbled daily, you're not paying attention. And I would suggest you could compress that time frame to maybe hourly. If you're not humbled hourly in the presence of your children, you're probably not paying attention.
Yes. And you're probably, under that line continuously where you think you're always the authority and what you say goes all the time, which that then means that the child does not have a voice and does not have an opinion and doesn't have the right to express, how they feel. And that shouldn't be. They should be allowed to express themselves and to let you know how they feel, because our actions around them impacts them for the rest of their life. Everything that we do around them is going to leave an imprint in their life that might end up being the program for when they become adults. So if we're rejecting them because we don't want to listen to them or how they feel, and they may feel rejected, my mom won't listen to me no matter what I say, so it doesn't matter. So eventually, as adults, they're going to feel rejected from everywhere, from their job, from their relationships, and they're going to feel like, what's the point? What's the point of me saying something? Nobody's going to listen. Why? Because their parents didn't listen to them, didn't give them that chance. So now they're grown up with this belief that, what's the point of me saying something? Nobody's going to listen to me. Because as a child, nobody listened to me. So it is very important to be very conscious, aware of the children and how we act, what we say around them, because whatever imprint we leave in their life is going to be part of their program as adults. And we want them to be, joyful adults.
Yeah, and one of the helpful tips for me in terms of parenting, but it expands to almost all of our relationships, is what I call to how to decide whether you're above or below and how to change to be above, is to pause, assess, and choose. Pause. Knee-jerk reactions are usually never helpful, unless it's a knee-jerk reaction if your child was putting their hand on the burner in the oven or running out into the street. Then a knee-jerk reaction to grab them out of harm's way is absolutely appropriate. But to pause, assess, and choose. And I use the example in the book, Conscious Parenting book, of the mother that goes through the drive-through after school, gets her child a big soft drink because the child says, "Oh, mom, I'm so thirsty," and passes it into the back seat, says, "Don't spill this." Well, 2 blocks later, "Mom, the drink knocked over." And, the immediate reaction is, "I told you not to do that." And you're pulling over and ready to clean up the mess. Pause, assess, and choose. Pause, assess. One, was it such a good idea to hand a big drink to the child in the back in a moving car?
Yeah, or running over that bumper that might have caused the drink to
Or did
spill.
the book bag knock it over because of that turn you
Yeah.
took? So maybe you put the child in a position of failing. And so assess and choose maybe just to be more genteel in your response. And it could be the child was negligent, but pause, assess, and choose. And I mean, if you make the wrong decision at the time, it's always okay to come back and apologize and try to figure out how to do better.
Absolutely. I
One quick
totally
example,
agree.
I yelled at my son one night when he was 7 or 8. He said something that made me angry. And I and he just turned into a puddle. He was such a sensitive young man. Mom got mad at me for yelling. And so we went into that family meltdown mode where nobody talks and just walks past each other for 2 hours, or basically hides so they don't have to interact. Never happened at your house, but it happened. Well, later that night, I sat down with my son, laid down for bed, and I said, "Son, I'm so sorry. I think you did something wrong, but Dad was totally inappropriate, and I want to apologize. I want to ask for your forgiveness." And he said, "Dad, would you be quiet?" I said, "Why?" He said, "I hate it when you're nice." So, in retrospect, I needed to acknowledge that I did wrong, because that sets the example going forward. I mean, as parents, we're going to have to make some tough decisions for our children, and some of those decisions might not be popular. But if we
Absolutely.
have done all of our actions in a loving, caring manner, that we can continue to do that, and we can continue to put up with the frustration when they say, "You're the worst parent I've ever seen because you won't let me do this or that."
And we all are going to experience this. I have a teenager. I, go through all kinds of things. But, I remember there were times where, and we all go through very stressful times in our lives, right? As adults, we may be confronted with challenges in life that leaves us in a position that we're extremely stressful and frustrated and angry. And and then we have our child that's, acting up or whatever. And what I found to me to be best, whenever I got myself into those situations was exactly what you said, just paused. And instead of reacting to my child based on how I felt at the moment inside, because that's what happens. We usually react to the children based on how we feel. So if we're feeling angry, we're going to lash out in anger and frustration. And I would just pause and not react and give myself a timeout. And then my child was looking for a reaction. She would like chase me around the house. Like, Mom, you're not talking to me. Like, she wanted a reaction. And I would say, you know what, Mom just needs a timeout. I'll come back to you when Mommy's off the timeout, and we'll sit down and talk. And sometimes we need to do that. We need to give ourselves a timeout, not necessarily the child. We have to assess how, what's going on inside of us at that moment. That's going to really impact how we're going to react to whatever situation, the child might be having a tantrum or having a bad day. But how we react always comes down to how we're feeling. So it's important that we assess, our own state of being.
We need to have a conscious awareness of where we are and what we're doing in the situation.
Yes,
That's tough. That takes work.
it certainly does.
And in relationship to what you were talking to your children, I didn't mention it earlier, but what's so important and what helps families go through those tough times, some better than others, is the presence of safe, stable, nurturing relationships. And so even though I was in a single family, single parent home, my mother was that safe, stable, nurturing relationship. It's those families where those safe, stable, nurturing relationships are not as strong or are more chaotic, when things tend to be more difficult for children. It's never all or none. It's oftentimes, some people struggle more than others or less than others. but we all are going to face problems and issues. The best we can do is provide those safe, stable, nurturing relationships to our children and to those around us, to our family. And those will be the things that make such a significant difference going forward.
Absolutely. And if you can't provide that, then it's time to, have an assessment of, okay, maybe I need to get some help as an adult, so I can become that conscious, aware parent, so I can provide that safe and loving environment for my child. And that's okay too, that it's not like you're a failure. Not at all. It just makes you even a stronger person. The fact that you realize as a parent, I need help because I can't provide the safe environment for the children, and they deserve that from me. And therefore, the least I can do is get myself help so I can get myself to a place that I can give that type of environment and that loving space.
Absolutely. I mean, the prime example there is postpartum depression. Women that are so overwhelmed, and they should never be ashamed that they need that help, and never feel guilty that they need that help. It's part of what they, it's part to help them so they can help that new life in their life, that new baby.
Yeah. And it's okay to say, I can't do this today. I need help. To somebody come over and help me out. I need a break. And that's totally okay. Sometimes based on how we were raised, we have the belief that, we have to put everything under the rug and keep going and be strong and still show up no matter what. And we don't share emotions. You can't let that lead your life, because then you're just going to repeat history. And this is, how abusive relationships just keep going into cycles, because we refuse to let go of old belief systems that were installed onto us. And we don't allow ourselves to open up to, it's okay. It's okay I talk about my emotions. It's okay I get help. It's okay I failed today. Tomorrow I'll have a better day, and so forth. And, that's very important, and nobody's judging. And if they do, it's because they're struggling themselves. People that judge, normally they're going through things inside of them, and the judging, it just, it's a way for them to tell themselves that they're okay, basically. Well, Dr. Bhavsar, please tell us, where can we find this book of yours?
My books are located on my website, which is www.mychildrenschildren.com. And on that website, there's lists of the books. I have a weekly blog that I post on that blog. And if anybody is so inclined, they can contact me through that blog or through the website, and I'll be glad to include them on the weekly distribution email list. And there's other helpful tidbits on that website. So I'm proud of it, and ask people to take a peek at that.
Awesome. So I'll have your link at the bottom of our video. Thank you so much, Dr. Saul, for coming on and sharing your story. What a wonderful thing you're doing to the community. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you, everyone, for watching. Please make sure you like the podcast, share the videos, and subscribe so I can get you more of these wonderful stories to you every week. So thank you for watching. Until next week.